Most people think the difference between an employee and an entrepreneur is just a job title. One has a boss, the other is the boss. That's technically true, but it's like saying the difference between a ship and an airplane is just the way they move. The real difference is the environment they operate in, and the way the captain thinks when the wind changes. When you're an employee, the world feels structured. You have a role, you have a set of tasks. You might have deadlines that frustrate you, but those deadlines also protect you. They tell you exactly when something is done. If things go wrong, there's usually a chain of command to handle the mess. It's like playing a sport with clear rules, referees, and a scoreboard. When you step into entrepreneurship, the rules vanish. You're playing a game where the field changes shape mid-match, and half the time, you're not even sure if you're winning or losing. No one is telling you what to do tomorrow morning. That sounds like freedom, but freedom is a test. Because without boundaries, the only thing pushing you forward is your own momentum. As an employee, your skill is execution. You're handed a plan, you make it happen. As an entrepreneur, your skill must be building the plan and figuring out if it's even the right plan in the first place. The risk isn't just that the plan fails. The risk is that the market changes while you're still drawing it. This shift is less about business and more about mindset. Employees are rewarded for consistency. Entrepreneurs are rewarded for adaptability. Employees earn by showing up. Entrepreneurs earn by creating something worth showing up for. Employees climb ladders. Entrepreneurs build them. But here's the paradox. The best entrepreneurs think like great employees. They understand the discipline, the reliability, the attention to detail that comes from having been in the trenches. The difference is, they take that discipline and apply it to problems no one has assigned to them yet. The transition is not glamorous. It often means giving up a steady paycheck for a steady stream of uncertainty. It means trading short-term stability for long-term possibility. You stop optimizing for comfort and start optimizing for growth. You learn that failure isn't a bad grade on a report card, it's tuition. The hardest part is psychological. As an employee, your success is measured in clear metrics, performance reviews, promotions, bonuses. As an entrepreneur, the metrics are blurry. Sometimes you feel like you're failing for months before realizing you were laying the groundwork for your biggest win. You have to get comfortable with progress you can't yet measure. What people rarely tell you is that entrepreneurship doesn't feel like a big leap. It feels like 1,000 small steps, each one requiring you to bet on yourself a little more. You start by solving one problem for one person, then another. Then you look up and you've built something that doesn't fit in anyone else's job description. It's not that one path is better than the other, it's that they serve different parts of you. Employment teaches you how to work within a system. Entrepreneurship forces you to build your own. The shift from one to the other isn't just a career change. It's an identity change, and the real reward. It's not the money, the title, or even the freedom. It's waking up and realizing that the only permission you need to pursue an idea is your own. If you want, I can also give you a short, punchy 5-second hook to grab attention at the start before you dive into this speech. That's often how Housel style talks keep audiences leaning forward. Would you like me to add that? Most people think switching from being an employee to becoming an entrepreneur is like switching lanes on a highway. You move over, accelerate a bit, and now you're in a different lane going to the same place. But the truth is, it's more like leaving the highway entirely and deciding to walk across a field where there is no path. No signs, no speed limits, and no guarantee that the destination you're heading toward even exists in the way you imagine. The real difference is not in the work you do or the industry you're in. It's in how you think when the rules disappear. When you're an employee, the boundaries are built in. You have a job description. You have a chain of command. You have expectations set by someone else. If you meet them, you've succeeded. There's an unspoken comfort in that structure because it shields you from certain kinds of decision making. You can be excellent at what you do without ever having to ask the bigger, messier questions like, is this the right thing to be doing at all? That question is a luxury in employment. It's a necessity in entrepreneurship. As an employee, your thinking naturally orients itself around the framework someone else has built. If you're in sales, you think about hitting targets. If you're in marketing, you think about campaigns. If you're in product development, you think about deadlines and specs. The system has guardrails, and even if you push against them, you know they're there. They tell you what's possible and what's not. But when you move into entrepreneurship, those guardrails vanish. You can go in any direction, which sounds freeing but is actually disorienting. When anything is possible, it's easy to do nothing. The skill shifts from operating within boundaries to creating your own boundaries out of thin air and trusting they're in the right place. In an employee mindset, the risk is personal performance. Will I do a good job? Will I meet expectations? Will my work be recognized? Those are real concerns, but they exist inside a predictable box. As an entrepreneur, the risk is existential. Will this idea even work? Will this market still exist in a year? Will the resources I'm betting on be there when I need them? There's no preset scoreboard that tells you how you're doing. You have to build the scoreboard yourself, decide which metrics matter, and be willing to admit you chose the wrong ones and start over. That kind of thinking requires a comfort with uncertainty that most people aren't used to cultivating. It's not that employees don't think strategically. They often do. But the strategy is about optimizing within an established reality. As an entrepreneur, the strategy is about creating that reality in the first place. You're not just playing a game, you're deciding what game to play, and sometimes halfway through, you realize the game you picked isn't worth playing, so you need to invent another one. This is where the mental shift becomes obvious. As an employee, you might spend months perfecting your role in the system. As an entrepreneur, you spend months figuring out if the system itself should exist. The absence of rules changes how you think about failure too. In a job, failure is often clear. Cut, missed targets, negative feedback, a project that didn't land. It's uncomfortable, but it's identifiable. In entrepreneurship, failure can be murky. You can feel like you're failing for a long time before you realize you were actually planting seeds. You can feel like you're winning before you realize you were just burning resources. This ambiguity forces you to think less in terms of right and wrong, success or failure, and more in terms of experiments. Instead of did it work, the question becomes what did I learn and how does that change the next move? That's not just a different question, it's a completely different way of thinking about action and consequence. This mental shift also changes your relationship with time. As an employee, time is linear. You work in set intervals, quarters, fiscal years, project timelines. You're rewarded for meeting deadlines and staying on track. As an entrepreneur, time becomes more elastic. There are moments when weeks of effort produce nothing visible, and moments when one lucky conversation changes the entire trajectory overnight. You start to think less about clocking hours and more about creating momentum. That means asking yourself not, how much time did I put in, but how much movement did I create? That's a question no one will ask you as an employee, but as an entrepreneur, it's the only one that matters. The disappearance of rules also forces you to rethink security. In a job, security comes from stability, regular paychecks, predictable workloads, benefits, and the knowledge that if you perform well, you'll probably keep your position. In entrepreneurship, security comes from adaptability. You realize the only way to feel safe is to become capable of adjusting quickly when circumstances change. The mindset shift here is subtle but profound. You stop looking for stability in external structures and start building it from internal resilience. It's no longer about whether the environment will protect you, but whether you can protect yourself in any environment. Then there's decision making. As an employee, decision making is often about choosing between options presented to you. You weigh the pros and cons, pick the best path, and execute. In entrepreneurship, decision-making is about generating the options in the first place. You can't just pick the best available path. You have to create paths where none exist. And when you realize you've built a dead end, you have to dismantle it and start again without losing momentum. That requires a kind of thinking that's proactive instead of reactive, creative instead of purely analytical, and iterative instead of fixed. Perhaps the biggest shift is in accountability. As an employee, accountability flows upward. You answer to a manager, a team lead, a board. As an entrepreneur, accountability flows inward. You answer to yourself. That sounds liberating, but it's also relentless. There's no external pressure to start early, push harder, or think bigger. You have to generate that pressure internally every single day. This forces you to change the way you think about motivation. It's no longer about meeting someone else's standards. It's about defining your own standards and holding yourself to them even when no one is watching. The mindset transformation from employee to entrepreneur is not about learning new information. It's about rewiring how you interpret the world when there's no longer a predefined set of instructions. You stop thinking, "What's my role?" and start thinking, "What needs to exist that doesn't yet?" You stop asking, "Am I doing this right?" and start asking, "Is this the right thing to be doing at all?" You stop looking for permission and start looking for opportunity. That is the real leap. Not quitting your job or starting a business, but learning to think in an environment where the rules are gone and the only constant is the one you create yourself. Employees are often measured by how well they execute a plan. The plan itself usually comes from somewhere else, a manager, a leadership team, a board. It might be presented in a neat slide deck, a detailed email, or a series of meetings. The job is to understand it, follow it, and deliver the result it's designed to produce. In that environment, success depends on precision, consistency, and the ability to work within the given structure. You're like a skilled builder handed a blueprint. Your role is to make sure the structure matches the drawing and that it's built on time and within budget. Entrepreneurs, on the other hand, don't receive blueprints. They create them. And that creation process isn't as straightforward as sitting down and writing out steps. Before a plan exists, there's uncertainty, incomplete information, shifting variables, and the constant possibility that what you're trying to build shouldn't be built at all. Entrepreneurs have to live in that uncertainty long enough to gather information, test assumptions, and eventually design something worth executing. This is a fundamental shift in how you approach work. Instead of asking, "How can I deliver this as efficiently as possible?" the question becomes, "Is this even the right problem to solve?" When you're an employee, the biggest risk is usually in the execution, missing a deadline, delivering subpar quality, exceeding a budget. These risks are tangible and easy to measure, but for an entrepreneur, the biggest risk is often invisible, building something that doesn't matter to anyone or solving a problem no one actually has. You could execute perfectly on a flawed idea and end up with nothing to show for it. That's why entrepreneurs spend so much of their energy not just building, but testing, revising, and sometimes scrapping entire projects before they're finished. It's not wasted effort. It's a recognition that a bad plan executed flawlessly is still a failure. Employees work within a defined scope. The starting point and the ending point are usually known before the work begins. Entrepreneurs start with a vague sense of where they want to go and must figure out the path along the way. This requires a tolerance for ambiguity and the ability to adapt when new information comes in. You can't be so committed to your first plan that you ignore signs it's wrong. Instead, you have to think of plans as hypotheses, educated guesses that need to be tested, validated, and adjusted repeatedly. One of the hidden challenges in moving from employee to entrepreneur is unlearning the instinct to always look for a predefined answer. In employment, there are usually best practices and established processes. If you follow them, you're safe. In entrepreneurship, best practices can be irrelevant or even harmful because what you're doing might not have been done before. The right answer doesn't exist yet. You have to invent it. This invention process is messy and non-linear. Some days you feel like you're making huge progress. Other days you realize you've been heading in the wrong direction for weeks. That constant cycle of reassessment is not a distraction. It's the job. The mindset around responsibility shifts too. Employees are responsible for their piece of the puzzle. Entrepreneurs are responsible for the whole puzzle, and for deciding whether the puzzle is even worth solving. This means thinking at multiple levels at once: the big picture vision, the medium-term strategy, and the immediate next step. You can't get lost in only one of these levels. If you're too focused on the vision, you never take action. If you're too focused on the immediate step, you might be moving quickly in the wrong direction. Balancing those perspectives becomes a daily mental exercise. There's also the matter of decision-making speed. In many companies, decisions go through a process: approvals, meetings, consensus building. This can feel slow, but it creates a buffer. As an entrepreneur, you often have to make decisions quickly, with incomplete information, and live with the consequences. Waiting for certainty usually means missing the opportunity. This forces you to develop a bias toward action, even when you're not entirely comfortable. The skill here isn't making perfect decisions. It's making decisions that are good enough to move forward, and then adjusting as you go. In an employee role, the structure supports you. There's a finance team to handle budgets, a marketing team to promote products, a legal team to handle contracts. You can focus on your specific function. As an entrepreneur, at least in the beginning, you are all of those teams. You have to think about cash flow, market positioning, customer experience, and operations all at once. This demands a way of thinking that is integrative rather than specialized. You can't afford to only see one piece of the business. You have to understand how all the pieces affect each other. This shift from execution to creation also changes how you view mistakes. In employment, a mistake can be a mark against your performance. In entrepreneurship, mistakes are inevitable and constant. The difference is that you're often making them in service of discovering what works. A wrong turn isn't necessarily a failure, it's data. The faster you can extract the lesson from it, the more valuable it becomes. This means your thinking has to move from "how do I avoid mistakes" to "how do I learn from mistakes faster than my competitors?" Another layer is emotional resilience. Employees often have the benefit of external validation, performance reviews, bonuses, promotions that confirm they're on the right track. Entrepreneurs can go long stretches without any validation at all. You might be working intensely on something without knowing if it will pay off. In that environment, you have to generate your own sense of progress. That could be hitting small internal milestones, receiving early feedback from customers, or simply moving closer to clarity about what your business should become. The thinking here shifts from waiting for approval to actively seeking insight. Entrepreneurs also have to think about opportunity cost in a way employees rarely do. Every project you work on comes at the expense of another project you could be doing. Every decision to invest time, money, or attention in one area means those resources aren't available for something else. This forces you to constantly evaluate whether what you're working on is the highest leverage use of your resources. As an employee, someone else often makes those trade-offs for you. As an entrepreneur, you're the one holding the scale, and no one tells you if you've weighed things correctly until the market responds. Ultimately, the move from executing someone else's plan to creating your own is not about rejecting structure, it's about becoming the source of it. It's a mental leap from following instructions to designing the instructions, from solving problems to deciding which problems are worth solving, from asking "how do I do this right?" to asking "what is the right thing to do in the first place?" It's about replacing the comfort of certainty with the necessity of curiosity, and accepting that the only way to find the path forward is to start walking before you can see the whole road. One of the biggest misconceptions about entrepreneurship is that it's purely about taking risks, breaking rules, and moving fast. While those elements often play a role, the truth is that the most successful entrepreneurs don't abandon discipline when they leave a job. They carry it with them. In fact, discipline is one of the most valuable things you can take from employment into entrepreneurship. The routines, standards, and habits you develop as an employee become the foundation for navigating the uncertainty of building something from scratch. When you work in a structured environment, you learn to show up on time, meet deadlines, follow through on commitments, and deliver quality consistently. Those habits might seem mundane in the moment, but when you step into entrepreneurship, they are what keep your efforts from collapsing under the weight of chaos. In an employee role, the discipline is often reinforced externally. There's a boss expecting updates, a system for tracking performance, and colleagues depending on your part of the work. The structure is designed to keep you on track. When you become an entrepreneur, that structure disappears. There is no one checking if you start work at 9 a.m., no one reminding you to hit the week's targets, no one sending follow-up emails if you slip behind. The accountability becomes entirely internal. Without discipline, freedom quickly turns into drift. It's not the lack of skill that sinks many entrepreneurs. It's the lack of a self-imposed framework to channel that skill productively. The discipline you bring from employment is more than punctuality or adherence to processes. It's the ability to focus on the important work even when you don't feel like it. In a job, you can't always pick and choose the tasks you want to do. Sometimes you have to push through the tedious parts because they're necessary for the bigger picture. Entrepreneurship has plenty of tedious parts too: paperwork, follow-up calls, refining systems, troubleshooting problems that don't seem exciting but keep the business functioning. People who have learned to work through those moments without waiting for inspiration have a massive advantage. Reliability is another trait shaped in employment that becomes critical in entrepreneurship. As an employee, being reliable means doing what you said you would do, when you said you would do it, and to the standard you agreed on. That same reliability builds trust with clients, partners, and even yourself when you're running a business. It's one thing to dream big and talk about your vision. It's another to deliver consistently on promises, especially when no one is breathing down your neck to make sure you do. Reliability in entrepreneurship isn't just about meeting deadlines. It's about creating a reputation that becomes one of your most valuable assets. In a company, you often learn the value of systems and processes. They may seem bureaucratic at times, but they exist to ensure that work is repeatable, scalable, and measurable. When you start your own business, you're responsible for building those systems from scratch. If you've learned in employment how to document workflows, manage priorities, and streamline tasks, you're already ahead of many new entrepreneurs who try to reinvent everything from memory each time. That discipline of systematizing your work allows you to spend less time firefighting and more time growing. Attention to detail is another form of discipline that carries over. In many jobs, details matter because they impact the customer experience, product quality, or brand image. You might not see the impact of catching a small mistake in a report or making sure an email is worded precisely, but over time, those small habits build a mindset that notices and corrects errors before they become problems. In entrepreneurship, details can be the difference between gaining a loyal client and losing them, between building a brand people trust and one they ignore. The discipline of caring about the details, even when no one else notices, becomes a competitive edge. Time management also transforms when you move from employee to entrepreneur. In employment, your day might be largely structured by meetings, deadlines, and a general rhythm of the workplace. As an entrepreneur, you control your own schedule, which means you also control whether that schedule is productive or wasted. The ability to prioritize, to allocate energy to the most important tasks rather than just the most urgent, is a discipline that often comes from years of managing workloads in a job. Entrepreneurs who lack that discipline tend to drift toward reactive work, constantly responding to what's in front of them instead of driving the business toward long-term goals. Discipline also shows up in how you handle money. In a job, you learn the value of budgets, resource allocation, and cost control. Even if you're not directly responsible for them, you see how overspending in one area can force cuts in another. You see how a department can meet goals without exhausting its resources. When you run your own business, those lessons become personal. Every dollar spent is a decision about your future. Entrepreneurs who carry over the discipline of financial stewardship are far less likely to collapse under avoidable expenses or poor allocation of resources. There's a mental discipline too, the ability to separate emotions from actions. In employment, you don't always get to follow your mood. You can't just stop working because you're frustrated with a client or because a project isn't going your way. That habit of continuing to operate professionally despite emotional fluctuations becomes even more vital when you're an entrepreneur. Business ownership can be a roller coaster, with wins and setbacks often happening in the same week, sometimes in the same day. The ability to act from principle and strategy rather than impulse is what keeps entrepreneurs moving forward when the ride gets rough. Another overlooked part of discipline from employment is communication. In a job, you learn to update stakeholders, clarify expectations, and ensure everyone is aligned. These are habits born from the need to keep projects on track and avoid misunderstandings. As an entrepreneur, clear communication is even more critical because you're not just keeping a team aligned, you're convincing clients, partners, and sometimes investors to believe in you. That discipline of communicating proactively and professionally can open doors that hustle alone cannot. The transition from employee to entrepreneur often exposes whether someone has internalized discipline or simply borrowed it from the structures around them. In a company, even people who aren't naturally disciplined can appear to be because the environment enforces it. But when you're on your own, the safety net is gone. The habits you've truly absorbed are the ones that survive in the absence of oversight. This is why many entrepreneurs say their early work experience, even in jobs they didn't love, gave them the work ethic they needed later. They were learning discipline without realizing it. Ultimately, the discipline gained in employment becomes the scaffolding that supports entrepreneurship. Without it, ideas stay ideas, work starts but doesn't finish, and momentum fades. With it, you can take on the unpredictability of building something new without getting lost in the noise. The freedom of entrepreneurship might be what draws people in, but it's discipline that allows them to stay there long enough to see results. When you move from being an employee to becoming an entrepreneur, one of the most jarring shifts is realizing you've traded short-term stability for long-term possibility. In employment, stability is built into the system. You know what day your paycheck arrives, you know your role, your responsibilities, and the expectations around your performance. You might even know the path you'll take if you stay in the same company for years. A promotion every so often, incremental raises, maybe a clear set of milestones that mark your career progression. That stability can feel safe, even comforting. It creates a rhythm to life, a predictability that allows you to plan months or years ahead without constantly worrying about how you'll meet your financial obligations. Entrepreneurship removes much of that safety net from the very first day. There's no guaranteed paycheck, no HR department mapping out your career development, no corporate benefits to cushion the risks. Instead, there's a blank slate, and while that's exciting, it also means the next month's income depends almost entirely on the decisions you make today. That's a trade-off many people underestimate when they leave a job. The short-term stability you had is gone, and what you've gained in return is potential. Potential for growth, for freedom, for impact. But potential is not the same as certainty. In a job, your daily actions are usually tied directly to immediate results within a controlled environment. If you perform well, you're likely to keep your role and maintain your income. In entrepreneurship, the link between effort and reward is less direct and far more delayed. You might pour yourself into a project for weeks or months without seeing any tangible return. You might launch something you believe in deeply and hear nothing but silence from the market at first. That lag between action and outcome is where many new entrepreneurs struggle, because the absence of instant feedback can make it feel like you're failing even when you're laying the groundwork for future success. This trade-off also affects how you think about risk. In employment, risk is often limited to losing your job or missing out on a promotion. In entrepreneurship, risk exists in every decision: pricing, partnerships, marketing strategies, product development, hiring, even timing. The consequences are amplified because they impact not just your income, but the very survival of the business. The willingness to take on that level of uncertainty is the price of admission to the possibility of building something that's entirely yours. The short-term stability of a job also shapes how you think about time. When you know your paycheck is coming regardless of the week's performance, you can afford to move at a steady pace. As an entrepreneur, time feels different. Every day carries opportunity cost. A week spent on the wrong priority can mean lost momentum that's difficult to recover. This doesn't mean rushing recklessly, but it does mean being acutely aware that the window for certain opportunities can close quickly. The mindset becomes one of intentional urgency, not panic, but a recognition that time invested today needs to compound into results tomorrow. There's also the emotional component of this trade-off. Stability often comes with emotional steadiness. You know where you stand, and while there may be stress, it's usually stress within known boundaries. In entrepreneurship, the emotional landscape is far more volatile. One day can bring both exhilarating wins and frustrating setbacks. You might close a big client in the morning and lose a critical supplier in the afternoon. The highs can be higher, but the lows can feel deeper because there's no larger organization to absorb the impact. The discipline to regulate your emotional responses becomes essential because decisions made in moments of panic or overconfidence can shape your business for years. Short-term stability in a job also means your personal life can often remain separate from your work life. You can leave the office and mentally check out, knowing your role is secure until the next workday. Entrepreneurship rarely offers that separation. The business lives in your mind all the time, not because you can't switch off, but because every decision feels like it has a direct impact on your future. Vacations, weekends, evenings, they're all still connected to the weight of responsibility you carry. This doesn't mean you can't have balance, but it does mean balance has to be actively created rather than passively given by the structure of a job. The long-term possibility you gain as an entrepreneur is not just financial. It's creative and strategic. In employment, your influence is usually limited to your role and the scope of your responsibilities. You can make meaningful contributions, but the overall direction is set by someone else. As an entrepreneur, you can shape the vision entirely. You decide which markets to serve, which problems to solve, how to position yourself, and how to grow. That kind of freedom allows for innovation in ways that are often impossible in larger, more rigid systems. But it comes with the burden of knowing that if the direction is wrong, there's no one else to redirect it. Another part of the trade-off is how success is measured. In a job, performance reviews, promotions, and raises give you clear signals that you're moving forward. In entrepreneurship, those markers are self-defined. You might decide success is hitting a certain revenue number, impacting a specific number of customers, or building a business that allows you to work from anywhere. The lack of external validation can be disorienting at first, especially if you're used to regular feedback. You have to create your own metrics and trust them even when no one else is telling you you're on the right track. Financially, the shift is one of delayed gratification. In a job, your income is relatively steady and increases come gradually. In entrepreneurship, income can be unpredictable at first, then suddenly spike if things take off. That's why many entrepreneurs live through lean early years before experiencing significant returns. The ability to weather that period without panicking or giving up requires a long-term mindset, one that sees the short-term instability as an investment in future freedom. The long-term possibility also includes scalability. In a job, your income and impact are often capped by the position you hold. As an entrepreneur, your efforts can multiply through systems, products, or teams that operate beyond your own hours. The stability you gave up can eventually be replaced by a different kind of stability, one built on assets and processes you've created. But reaching that point requires enduring the instability long enough for those systems to take root. This trade-off forces you to develop patience in a new way. In employment, patience is about waiting for promotions or the right opportunities within the company. In entrepreneurship, patience is about enduring the uncertainty of building something that doesn't yet exist. It's about trusting the process even when the outcome is still invisible. It's about continuing to invest in possibilities that might not pay off for months or even years. Leaving short-term stability for long-term possibility is ultimately a choice about where you want your security to come from. In a job, security comes from the organization's ability to keep you employed. In entrepreneurship, security comes from your ability to adapt, create, and capture opportunities as they arise. One form of security is external and immediate, the other is internal and earned over time. The trade-off is that the second kind often feels insecure in the beginning, but if you stay the course, it can eventually provide a level of freedom and control that the first kind never could. One of the most profound realizations that comes with the shift from employee to entrepreneur is that the real reward is not the money, the title, or even the freedom to set your own schedule. It's the understanding that you no longer need anyone's permission to act on an idea. In a job, even the most creative and ambitious employees operate within a hierarchy. No matter how brilliant the idea, it usually has to pass through a chain of approvals. Budgets must be allocated, risks assessed, resources assigned. You might wait weeks or months before being told yes, and sometimes the yes never comes. That process can be necessary in large organizations to manage risk, but it also means that your ability to act is tied to someone else's willingness to agree. Entrepreneurship removes that gatekeeping. If you see an opportunity, you can move on it immediately. You can test an idea this afternoon, launch a pilot next week, or pivot entirely without having to justify your decision to a boardroom. That ability to act directly on your thoughts is liberating in a way that's difficult to appreciate until you've experienced it. It changes how you think, how you notice opportunities, and how you measure your own potential. The question stops being, will they approve this, and becomes, how fast can I make this happen? This shift isn't just about speed, it's about ownership. When you don't need permission, you own both the decision and its outcome. In a job, decisions are often shared responsibilities. If something fails, the blame can be diffused across the team or up the chain. As an entrepreneur, the responsibility is yours alone. That can be daunting, but it's also empowering because it means your fate is tied directly to your actions, not to office politics, shifting company priorities, or someone else's interpretation of your value. The clarity that comes from that level of ownership can be a powerful motivator. When you stop waiting for permission, you also stop self-editing as much. In employment, people often learn to think within the bounds of what will be approved, trimming their ideas to fit the organization's appetite for risk or innovation. Over time, that can narrow your creative range. As an entrepreneur, there's no need to shrink your vision to match someone else's comfort level. You can explore bold ideas, test unconventional approaches, and follow instincts that might seem too risky in a corporate setting. The freedom to think without preemptively censoring yourself opens doors to opportunities you might never have considered before. There's a psychological element to this freedom as well. In a job, part of your confidence often comes from validation. Your work is approved, your proposals are accepted, your promotions confirm your capability. Without those external markers, entrepreneurs have to build self-belief from a different source. Acting without permission forces you to trust your judgment, even when the outcome is uncertain. Over time, that trust compounds into confidence, not arrogance, but a grounded belief that you can figure things out as you go. Not needing permission also changes your relationship with failure. In a job, failure can be career limiting because it's often visible to those above you and tied to their evaluation of your performance. That dynamic can lead to risk aversion, choosing the safe path even when the bolder move might have produced better results. As an entrepreneur, failure is simply part of the process. You can try something, watch it flop, and immediately try something else without waiting for approval to proceed. This iterative cycle, idea, test, adjust, repeat, allows you to move faster than anyone operating in a permission-based environment. Another important aspect is how this autonomy changes your sense of time. In employment, time is often segmented by organizational rhythms, quarterly targets, annual budgets, performance review cycles. You might have to wait until the next fiscal year to secure funding for a project, or until leadership meets to approve a new direction. As an entrepreneur, you're not bound by those cycles. You can act the moment an opportunity presents itself, whether that's launching a new product, entering a market, or forming a partnership. This agility can be a decisive advantage, especially in industries where timing is critical. The absence of permission also encourages experimentation. In a corporate setting, experiments can be costly in terms of approvals, documentation, and oversight. As a result, they're often reserved for well-researched ideas with a high probability of success. In entrepreneurship, you can run small, fast experiments with minimal investment, learn from them, and scale the ones that work. This culture of rapid experimentation fosters a mindset that sees uncertainty not as a threat, but as a playground for discovery. There's also a deeper personal transformation that comes from living without the need for permission. Many people spend years of their working lives underestimating their own capacity to lead, innovate, or create because they've been conditioned to wait for someone else to say yes. When you remove that dependency, you start to see yourself differently. You begin to recognize that you're capable of shaping not just your work, but your entire life according to your vision. That realization can spill over into other areas: how you approach relationships, health, learning, and personal growth. However, with this freedom comes the responsibility to set your own standards. In a job, standards are often defined for you: quality benchmarks, timelines, performance metrics. As an entrepreneur, no one is holding you to those standards except yourself. That means you have to be clear about what good enough means for your work and where you draw the line between bold risk-taking and reckless decisions. Without self-imposed standards, the same freedom that empowers you can also lead to mediocrity or wasted effort. Not needing permission also reshapes how you think about opportunity cost. When you're the decision maker, every choice to pursue one idea means not pursuing another. There's no committee to spread the responsibility across. You alone decide how to allocate your time, energy, and resources. This forces a heightened awareness of what matters most and a sharper focus on high-leverage activities. You can't hide behind "I wasn't allowed to" as an excuse for not pursuing something. You either did or you didn't. One of the subtler benefits is that acting without permission trains you to see opportunities where others see obstacles. Many people are so used to navigating formal channels that they fail to notice paths outside them. Entrepreneurs learn to spot the gap in the market, the underutilized resource, the untested idea, and to move quickly before the window closes. That habit of spotting and seizing opportunities becomes second nature, and it's one of the most valuable skills in business. The real reward, then, is less about the tangible outcomes and more about the internal shift. You stop being someone who waits and start being someone who moves. You stop relying on external structures to validate your ideas and start relying on your own ability to test and refine them. You stop seeing yourself as a participant in someone else's vision and start seeing yourself as the architect of your own. The moment you realize you don't need permission to act is the moment you start operating on a completely different level, not just in business, but in how you approach everything you do.